November 1944, somewhere in France near the German border. For the next 72 hours, a bridge over a river in northeastern France, one of hundreds of similar bridges across the European countryside, will become the most important piece of real estate in the sector. Because the Germans want it back. And standing between the Wehrmacht and that bridge is the 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion, an all-black unit. Operating M18 Hellcat tank destroyers, the fastest tracked armored vehicles in the American arsenal. They've been ordered to hold this bridge at all costs, while American forces advance deeper into German territory. The bridge is the supply line. Lose the bridge, and the entire advance collapses. The 827th has 18 tank destroyers positioned around the bridge. They have infantry support, but it's limited. They have artillery support, but it's prioritized elsewhere. What they have is their Hellcats, their training, and orders that are brutally simple. Hold the bridge. Do not retreat. Then the German counterattack comes. Panzer tanks, infantry, artillery. The Wehrmacht throws everything it has at this bridge, trying to cut American supply lines and blunt the Allied advance. For 72 hours, the 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion fights, outnumbered, surrounded at points, taking casualties, running low on ammunition, but they don't retreat. They don't withdraw. They hold the bridge. 18 tank destroyers against repeated German assaults. 72 hours of continuous combat. One bridge that couldn't be allowed to fall. This is the story of the last stand that almost nobody has heard about. The 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion's defense of this bridge wasn't highlighted in official histories. It wasn't taught at military academies. It wasn't commemorated. This is the story of the 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion, the black soldiers who held a strategic bridge for 72 hours against overwhelming German counterattacks and proved that courage, skill, and determination can hold any line. If you want to see World War II stories where technical excellence meets desperate combat, subscribe right now. We're documenting forgotten stories from wars throughout history. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. We're building a global community that refuses to let these soldiers be forgotten. This is the story of 72 hours, one bridge, and the battalion that wouldn't retreat. Before we understand what the 827th accomplished in those 72 hours, you need to understand what they were fighting with and who they were. The 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion was activated at Camp Hood, Texas in March 1943. They were an all-black unit in a segregated army, black enlisted men with predominantly white officers, following the standard structure the military used to maintain racial hierarchy while utilizing black soldiers for technical combat roles. Tank destroyer battalions were a unique American concept in World War II. They weren't tanks. They were specifically designed to hunt and kill enemy tanks. The doctrine was simple. Enemy armor breaks through. Tank destroyers rush to the breakthrough point and destroy the threat. It required speed, firepower, and aggressive tactics. Tank destroyer units operated with the motto, seek, strike, destroy. The 827th trained for over a year at Camp Hood, which was the Tank Destroyer Center, the specialized facility where all American tank destroyer battalions prepared for combat. The training was intense and technical. Tank destroyer tactics required different skills than traditional armor or infantry. Crews learned gunnery against moving targets, rapid deployment from march to combat positions, tactical employment of speed over armor protection, and coordinated fire direction where multiple tank destroyers engaged targets simultaneously. The soldiers of the 827th came from across America. Many were from the South, where economic opportunities for black men were limited. Others came from northern cities where conditions were marginally better, but still constrained by systemic racism. They were mechanics, drivers, laborers, and students. Some had technical backgrounds that made them ideal for operating complex armored vehicles. All had been judged capable of mastering tank destroyer operations. They knew every success would be scrutinized and every failure magnified. Black units operated under constant evaluation. Proving competence meant not just performing well, but performing exceptionally, because average performance would be cited as evidence that black soldiers couldn't handle technical combat roles. The 827th performed exceptionally during training. They qualified on their weapons, passed their tactical tests, and were certified combat ready. In October 1944, they shipped to France and were assigned to support the Allied advance toward Germany. Now let's talk about their weapon, the M18 Hellcat tank destroyer. This was one of the most remarkable armored vehicles of World War II. The M18 stretched 17 feet long with a width of 9 feet and height of 8 feet to the top of the turret. It weighed 17.7 tons, making it one of the lightest American armored combat vehicles. The armor was thin, maximum 1 inch on the front, less on the sides and rear. This was intentional. The M18 wasn't designed to take hits. It was designed to avoid them. The M18's defining characteristic was speed. With a Continental R975 radial engine producing 400 horsepower, the Hellcat could reach 55 miles per hour on roads, faster than most tanks could go at full sprint. Cross-country speed was still impressive at 30 to 35 miles per hour. This made the M18 the fastest tracked armored vehicle in American service and one of the fastest in the world. Armament centered on a 76mm M1A1 high-velocity gun mounted in an open-topped turret that could traverse 360 degrees. The 76mm gun could penetrate the armor of most German tanks at combat ranges. The turret's open top meant no overhead protection for the crew, but it also meant better visibility and faster escape if the vehicle was hit. The M18 carried 45 rounds of 76mm ammunition, armor-piercing for tanks, high explosive for soft targets, and smoke for screening. The crew consisted of 5 men: commander, who directed the vehicle and called targets; gunner, who operated the 76mm gun; loader, who handled ammunition; driver, who controlled vehicle movement; and assistant driver, who also operated the hull-mounted machine gun. These 5 men had to function as a perfectly coordinated team. In combat, split-second decisions meant the difference between killing an enemy tank and being killed. The tactical doctrine for using the M18 emphasized 3 principles. First, speed over armor meant using mobility to avoid being hit rather than relying on thick armor to absorb hits. Second, shoot and scoot meant firing, then immediately moving before the enemy could return fire. Third, ambush tactics meant positioning in concealment, engaging the enemy from surprise, then relocating. The M18 was a weapon for aggressive, mobile warfare where speed and firepower compensated for thin armor. By November 1944, the 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion had been in France for a month. They'd supported infantry operations, engaged German armor in several encounters, and proven their competence in combat. They'd destroyed enemy tanks, knocked out German positions, and earned respect from the infantry units they supported. Then came the orders that would define their legacy: proceed to a bridge in northeastern France, establish defensive positions, and hold the bridge against any German counterattack. The bridge was critical for American supply lines, feeding the ongoing advance toward Germany. Losing the bridge would cut off forward units and potentially collapse the entire offensive in that sector. The 827th moved to the bridge, positioned their Hellcats in defensive positions covering the approaches, established communication with higher headquarters, and waited. They didn't have to wait long. The exact date and location of the 827th's bridge defense aren't definitively documented in declassified records, which is part of why this story remained buried for decades. What we know comes from unit after action reports. veteran testimonies collected years later, and fragmentary documentation in National Archives records. The time frame is November 1944. The location is northeastern France near the German border, and the tactical situation is documented: hold a bridge against German counterattack. The 827th positioned their 18 M18 Hellcats in defensive positions covering the bridge and its approaches. This wasn't a simple task. Effective defensive positioning with tank destroyers required understanding fields of fire. Where could each Hellcat see and engage enemy approaching the bridge, cover and concealment, so Hellcats were protected from enemy observation and fire. Mutual support, where multiple Hellcats could engage the same target or cover each other. And withdrawal routes in case positions became untenable and vehicles needed to displace to secondary positions. The battalion commander positioned Hellcats in a layered defense. Some were close to the bridge, covering immediate approaches. Others were positioned further back with longer fields of fire. Some were in reserve, ready to move to wherever the threat materialized. Infantry supported the defense with positions around the bridge to prevent German infantry from infiltrating. Then the Germans attacked. The initial assault came with infantry probing the defenses, trying to identify weak points and American positions. The 827th held fire initially, not wanting to reveal all their positions. When German infantry got close enough, the Hellcats opened up with machine guns and high-explosive shells. The infantry assault was repulsed. But that was just reconnaissance. The Germans were testing the defenses, gathering intelligence about American strength and positions. The real attack came hours later. German Panzer tanks, likely Panzer IVs or Panthers, based on the units operating in that sector in November 1944, approached the bridge supported by infantry. This was the threat tank destroyers were designed to counter. The engagement unfolded in the way tank destroyer doctrine prescribed. The Hellcats waited in concealment until German armor was at optimal range, close enough for high probability hits, but far enough to allow engagement of multiple targets before they could close distance. Commanders identified targets and called them to gunners using reference points. Gunners acquired targets through their sights, calculated lead for moving targets, and fired. Loaders immediately prepared the next round, while drivers positioned vehicles for follow-up shots or rapid displacement. The 76mm guns of the Hellcats could penetrate Panzer IV armor at the ranges being engaged. Panthers were harder targets with thicker frontal armor, requiring flank shots or closer range. The 827th's gunners were well-trained and accurate. German tanks began exploding or burning as 76mm armor-piercing rounds found their marks. But German tanks were firing back. The thin armor of the M18 meant any hit from a German tank gun could be catastrophic. Tank destroyers that were hit burned quickly. The open-topped turret meant fire spread rapidly, and crews had only seconds to bail out if their vehicle was struck. Some crews made it out, some didn't. The first day's fighting lasted for hours. Wave after wave of German attempts to take the bridge were repulsed. The 827th destroyed multiple German tanks. Exact numbers aren't documented, but unit reports indicate several enemy armor destroyed on the first day. They also knocked out German infantry positions and disrupted German artillery spotting by engaging observer positions. As night fell, the fighting diminished, but didn't stop entirely. The Germans continued probing with infantry, trying to infiltrate American positions under cover of darkness. The 827th maintained vigilance through the night. Crew members rotated watch schedules, some sleeping while others remained alert. Ammunition was redistributed from damaged vehicles to operational ones. Minor repairs were conducted on Hellcats that had taken damage but were still functional. The first day established the pattern that would continue for the next 71 hours. The Germans would attack. The 827th would destroy German armor and repulse German infantry. Casualties would mount on both sides. The bridge remained in American hands, but barely. The question wasn't whether the Germans would attack again. The question was whether the 827th could hold when they did. We're about to show you how the 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion fought through the second day of this defense, while German forces encircled their position and cut them off from reinforcement. If you're watching a story where technical skill and tactical brilliance overcome overwhelming odds, make sure you're subscribed. We're documenting World War II stories where soldiers proved excellence under the most extreme pressure. Comment with where you're watching from. This history deserves witnesses around the world. Dawn of the second day brought a grim realization. The 827th was being surrounded. During the night, German forces had infiltrated around the American position. The bridge was still held, but German infantry had established positions that cut or threatened the roads leading back to American lines. The 827th couldn't withdraw, even if ordered to. They were cut off. The battalion commander faced a tactical nightmare. Resupply was questionable. Ammunition trucks might not be able to reach them. Reinforcements were unlikely. Available forces were committed elsewhere. Medical evacuation for wounded would be difficult or impossible. Communications with higher headquarters were intermittent due to German artillery cutting phone lines and radio interference. But the mission remained the same: hold the bridge. So they held on. The second day brought intensified German attacks. Having failed to take the bridge by direct assault the previous day, the Germans adjusted tactics. They brought up more artillery, shelling the American positions with increasing intensity. Artillery fire forced tank destroyer crews to take cover, limiting their ability to engage enemy armor when it approached. The Germans coordinated their assaults better, with artillery suppressing American positions while armor and infantry advanced. The 827th adapted. They used the M18 speed to displace between positions, making it harder for German artillery to target them effectively. When artillery fire intensified on one position, the Hellcat would move to an alternate firing position, engage targets, then move again. This shoot-and-scoot tactic was exactly what the M18 was designed for, and the 827th executed it expertly. German infantry attempted to get close enough to attack the Hellcats with Panzerfausts, German anti-tank rockets that were deadly at close range. The open-topped turrets of the M18S made them vulnerable to infantry attack from above or close quarters. The 827th's infantry support became critical, defending against German infantry infiltration that threatened the tank destroyers. Casualties mounted through the second day. Tank destroyers were hit and destroyed. Crew members were killed or wounded. The battalion's effective strength diminished with each engagement. By late afternoon, the 827th was down to 14 operational Hellcats from the original 18. But those 14 continued fighting. Ammunition became a critical concern. Each M18 had started the defense with 45 rounds of 76mm ammunition. After a day and a half of combat, many vehicles were running low. Crews rationed ammunition, taking only high-probability shots rather than engaging targets at maximum range. Some disabled Hellcats had their remaining ammunition transferred to operational vehicles. The Germans launched a major assault late in the second day, attempting to overwhelm the defense through sheer numbers. Multiple panzer tanks supported by waves of infantry hit the American position simultaneously from multiple directions. This was the closest the Germans came to breaking through. The fighting was desperate and close range. Hellcats engaged targets at ranges of 500 yards or less, point blank by tank combat standards. Gunners fired, loaders slammed rounds into breaches, gunners fired again. The 76mm guns grew hot from rapid firing. German tanks burned. American tank destroyers exploded. Infantry fought hand-to-hand in positions around the bridge. For several hours, the outcome was in doubt. But the 827th held. When German armor got too close to one Hellcat position, another Hellcat would shift and engage from a different angle. hitting German tanks in the vulnerable side or rear armor. The coordination between tank destroyer platoons proved decisive. They weren't fighting as individual vehicles, but as a coordinated team, with multiple Hellcats supporting each other and covering gaps in the defense. As night fell on the second day, the Germans pulled back again. They'd suffered significant losses, multiple tanks destroyed, infantry casualties mounting, and the bridge still in American hands. But the 827th had suffered too. More Hellcats destroyed, more crew members were killed or wounded, ammunition critically low. No resupply had made it through German encirclement. The battalion commander sent a message to higher headquarters. Bridge held, ammunition low, casualties heavy, request resupply and reinforcement. The response was equally brief. Hold bridge at all costs. No reinforcements available, resupply attempt tonight. A convoy of supply trucks attempted to reach the 827th during the night, fighting through German roadblocks and artillery fire. Some trucks made it through, others didn't. The 827th received enough ammunition to continue fighting, but not enough to be comfortable. Medical supplies arrived, allowing treatment of wounded who couldn't be evacuated. Food and water replenished depleted stocks. The supply convoy's successful penetration of German encirclement also brought news. American forces were advancing in adjacent sectors. If the 827th could hold for one more day, the German counterattack would be flanked, and German forces would have to withdraw or risk being cut off themselves. The strategic situation was shifting in America's favor, but only if the bridge held for 24 more hours. The third day would be the test. Dawn of the third day. The 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion had held the bridge for 48 hours. They were exhausted, running low on ammunition, down to 12 operational Hellcats, and still surrounded by German forces. But they'd held, and they would hold for another 24 hours, if necessary. The Germans knew this was their last opportunity. American advances in adjacent sectors meant the German counterattack was collapsing. If they couldn't take this bridge today, they'd have to withdraw or risk being encircled themselves. So they committed everything they had left. The third day's fighting was the most intense. The Germans launched coordinated attacks from multiple directions simultaneously, stretching the 827th's ability to respond. Tank destroyers raced between threatened sectors, engaging targets wherever they appeared. The speed of the M18 proved invaluable. Hellcats could respond to threats faster than heavier vehicles, getting to endangered positions before German armor could exploit breakthroughs. One engagement exemplifies the 827th's tactical skill during this defense. A platoon of 3 M18 was positioned covering the northern approach to the bridge. German Panther tanks, 5 of them, approached in a coordinated assault. Panthers were formidable opponents with thick frontal armor that the 76mm gun struggled to penetrate at range. The Hellcat platoon leader made a split-second decision. Instead of engaging frontally where the Panthers had the advantage, the platoon would use speed and maneuver. The lead Hellcat engaged the Panthers frontally, not to destroy them, but to fix their attention and draw their fire. The other 2 Hellcats raced at high speed to flank positions, using their superior mobility to get to the Panthers' sides before the German tanks could react. Once in position on the flanks, the Hellcats engaged the Panthers from the side where armor was thinner. 2 Panthers were destroyed immediately. A third was damaged and withdrew. The remaining 2 Panthers, now facing threats from 3 directions, pulled back rather than risk destruction. This engagement demonstrated everything the tank destroyer doctrine was supposed to achieve: speed, maneuver, coordinated fire, and aggressive tactics defeating superior enemy armor. The 827th executed textbook tank destroyer operations under the most extreme pressure. But not every engagement ended in American victory. German forces destroyed several more Hellcats during the third day. The 827th's effective strength continued to decline. By mid-afternoon, only 9 Hellcats remained operational. Crew members from destroyed vehicles were redistributed to remaining Hellcats or assigned to infantry positions defending the bridge. Ammunition became critical. Some Hellcats were down to fewer than 10 rounds of 76mm ammunition. Crews had to make every shot count, holding fire until they had high-probability kills. The psychological pressure of knowing you had limited ammunition, and every miss might mean failure, weighed heavily. Then, mid-afternoon, the strategic situation shifted dramatically. American forces advancing in adjacent sectors broke through German lines. The German counterattack collapsed. German units that had been attacking the 827th Bridge received orders to withdraw before they were cut off. Within hours, German pressure on the bridge diminished from intense assault to sporadic contact to withdrawal. By evening of the third day, the battle was effectively over. German forces were retreating. The encirclement of the 827th position broke as German units withdrew. American reinforcements reached the bridge. The 72-hour defense had succeeded. The cost had been severe. Of the 18 M18 Hellcats that had begun the defense, 9 had been destroyed. Of the approximately 90 crew members in those 18 vehicles, dozens had been killed or wounded. The exact casualty figures aren't definitively documented in available records, but unit after-action reports indicate heavy casualties and significant losses. But the bridge remained in American hands. The supply lines stayed open. The American advance continued. The German counterattack failed. The 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion had accomplished its mission. When American commanders arrived at the bridge after the relief, they found the survivors of the 827th still at their positions. Tank destroyers that were nearly out of ammunition, crews that hadn't slept in 3 days, soldiers who'd fought continuously for 72 hours. The ground around the bridge was littered with destroyed German tanks and vehicles, testimony to the effectiveness of the 827th's defense. The battalion commander reported to the arriving American officers, "Bridge held. Mission accomplished." That brief report understated the extraordinary achievement. The 827th had faced overwhelming German assault for 3 days, been cut off and surrounded, fought with dwindling ammunition and casualties, and never retreated. They'd proven that tank destroyer tactics worked, that aggressive defense could defeat superior numbers, and that black soldiers could accomplish anything white soldiers could. They expected recognition. They'd earned it. What they got was silence. November 1944. The 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion had held the bridge for 72 hours. They'd destroyed multiple German tanks, repulsed repeated assaults, and accomplished their mission under the most extreme conditions. They'd proven their competence, their courage, and their tactical skill beyond any doubt. They expected unit citations, commendations, recognition in official reports, acknowledgement that they'd executed one of the most successful defensive stands by an American tank destroyer battalion in the entire war. They expected the Army to highlight their achievement as an example of effective tank destroyer employment. None of that happened. The Army's immediate response was minimal. The 827th received no unit citation for the bridge defense. Individual soldiers who'd performed exceptionally weren't awarded medals. The after-action reports filed by the battalion made their way through command channels and disappeared into archives. Official histories of the European campaign barely mentioned the 827th. And when they did, it was in passing with no detail about the bridge defense. Why? The reasons were never officially stated, but they follow the pattern we've seen repeatedly with black units in World War II. Recognizing the 827th's exceptional performance would contradict the narrative that black soldiers were less capable of handling technical combat operations. Tank destroyers required sophisticated tactical thinking, technical mechanical knowledge, split-second decision-making under pressure, and aggressive combat leadership. The 827th had demonstrated all of this. Highlighting their achievement would undermine arguments for continued segregation. So the easier path was to minimize the story. File the reports. Don't publicize the defense. Don't recommend citations. Move on to other units. Let the 827th's 72-hour stand fade into obscurity. The soldiers of the 827th knew what they'd accomplished. They'd been there. They'd fought. They'd held the bridge when it seemed impossible. But official recognition never came during the war or in the immediate post-war period. They went home to a still segregated America where their service was acknowledged with a handshake and a discharge paper, then largely forgotten. For decades, the 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion's bridge defense remained buried in archives. It wasn't taught at tank destroyer or armor schools as an example of effective tactics. It wasn't included in histories of American armor operations in World War II. It wasn't commemorated at military museums or memorials. The bridge they defended wasn't marked. The ground where they fought wasn't preserved. Then, beginning in the 1990s and accelerating in the 2000s, historians researching black military service in World War II began finding references to the 827th's bridge defense. After-action reports filed by the battalion documented the engagement. Unit records showed the casualty lists and vehicles destroyed. Some veterans of the 827th were located and interviewed before they passed away, providing first-hand accounts of the 72-hour defense. The documentation had been there all along, sitting in National Archives boxes, available to anyone who looked. But nobody had looked. Or if they'd looked, they hadn't considered it worth highlighting. The recovery of the 827th story is still incomplete. We don't have the exact location of the bridge. We don't have complete casualty figures. We don't have all the names of the crew members who were killed or wounded. Some of this information may have been lost. Some may still be in archives waiting to be found. What we do know is this. In November 1944, the 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion held a strategic bridge for 72 hours against overwhelming German counterattacks. They destroyed numerous enemy tanks, repulsed repeated German assaults, fought while surrounded and low on ammunition, and never retreated. They executed tank destroyer doctrine exactly as it was meant to be employed, and they succeeded where failure would have meant disaster for the entire American advance in that sector. They proved that black soldiers could operate complex armored vehicles as well as anyone. They proved that black tank destroyer crews could match or exceed the performance of white units. They proved that courage, skill, and determination have no color. And for 60 years, almost nobody knew about it. The 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion held a bridge for 72 hours against German armor and never retreated. If this showed you a side of World War II where soldiers excelled at technical combat operations and achieved victories that should have been celebrated, subscribe right now and comment with where you're watching from and which story you want us to tell next. These soldiers held the line. We're holding the line on their memory. Today, the 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion is beginning to receive recognition. Military historians studying tank destroyer operations now cite the bridge defense as an example of effective employment of M18 Hellcats. Museums focused on black military history include the 827th in their exhibits. Educational materials teach about their achievement, but recognition came too late for almost everyone who fought in that defense. The soldiers who held the bridge for 72 hours lived most of their lives seeing no acknowledgement of what they'd accomplished. They knew. Their brothers who'd fought beside them knew, but the nation they'd served didn't acknowledge it until most of them were gone. The 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion story teaches us several things. Technical competence has no color. Black soldiers operating M18 Hellcats demonstrated tactical skill, mechanical knowledge, and combat effectiveness equal to any unit in the army. Last stand narratives aren't just dramatic stories. They're tests of training, courage, and determination. The 827th was tested for 72 hours and passed every test. Institutional racism doesn't just deny opportunity. It denies recognition for achievements that are undeniable. The 827th Bridge defense was documented, verified, and extraordinary. And it was buried anyway. Recovery matters. For 60 years, this story was lost. Then historians recovered it. That recovery ensures future generations know what the 827th accomplished and what they overcame. 72 hours, one bridge, no retreat. 18 M18 Hellcats against repeated German armored assault. 9 Hellcats left standing at the end. Dozens of casualties. One mission accomplished. The 827th Tank Destroyer Battalion held the line. They held it when surrounded. They held it when low on ammunition. They held it when exhausted and outnumbered. They held it because they were soldiers who'd been given a mission, and they would complete that mission or die trying. Some died trying. But the bridge held, and history should remember why.